Hey folks, this is Jake from So We Flow, and you're listening to the Why We Move podcast. We speak to incredible movers from all sorts of disciplines to share their stories and give you practical and inspirational advice on movement and living a happy, healthy life. We welcome beginners and experts, introverts and extroverts, fanatics and casuals to better themselves and inspire others. Today, we're going to be talking about yoga, movement, life goals, and changes in direction with Joaquin Gomez. He's someone that I've followed on Instagram for quite some time now, and he not only has a physically impressive practice, but I think a story that embodies the life-changing power of yoga. So thanks for joining us, Joaquin. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the second and the first yoga-focused podcast. So if you just want to give yourself a little intro to the listeners, I think they'd appreciate hearing it from you first.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Joaquin. I'm actually from Argentina, but I grew up in Ibiza in Spain. And I've been living in London for about 6 years now, on and off. I'm a yoga teacher and a movement enthusiast, and I teach full-time for the past 3 years in London. Very happy about it. I also enjoy content creation, so I try to share my practice and hopefully inspire others through my movement practice.
Yeah, for sure. So you've only been teaching for 3 years, or is that just in London that you've been teaching for 3 years?
In London, 3 years. Before, I taught for another year back in Ibiza, so a total of 4. Not that much, but
I thought, to be honest, like given how impressive your practice is, I mean, I thought you would have actually been teaching a lot longer than that. I imagine, how long have you actually been practicing for before you started teaching?
So I would say 5 months before, so 4.5 years.
Incredible.
Yeah, something like that.
So it sounds like you truly dedicated a lot of time to it to get to where you are now, I imagine then.
My mom used to say when I was a kid I was an obsessive compulsive person, so I guess that helps.
That can go either way, right? Sometimes
Yeah, exactly.
It's bad, sometimes it's good. And you know what? I think that personality is like very, very common in the yoga industry, especially with teachers. Like I've seen a lot of teachers they're like, oh, you know, I used to do loads of drugs, drink loads, party loads, and then I kind of quit it all and started yoga, and I took that mentality and I just gave it to yoga. So it kind of switched that for something else.
I relate in some of these things that you just mentioned.
Yeah, sure. So let's just go back into the past a little and talk about, so when and how did you get into yoga and movement? How did it all start for you?
Sure. So it's kind of a funny story, I would say. So my first contact with movement in itself, it was as a kid. I was hyperactive, I guess, like many kids are. And my parents used to call me, so in Spanish, there's a saying that is, you say your kid is a culo inquieto, which literally, I don't know how it would sound in English, but means restless ass. Basically that you're all over the place and you don't stop. You cannot sit for 30 seconds. You're already like messing around, being naughty. So I was like that. And they decided to bring me to a sports center so they could calm me down, basically. And they showed me a few different options they gave me, and I chose athletics because I love to run. I was like running all over the place. So they said, okay, so we guess that's what he'll be doing. And yeah, eventually I enjoyed it. I actually did athletics for 10 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, I started first just doing a little bit of everything. When I was 7, they put me there basically with a bunch of other kids. So I was doing a bit of long distance, short distance. I was doing long jump. From there, I transitioned to hurdles, from 100 meters hurdles to 400 meters. And eventually, with hurdles, I ended up doing quite well, and I moved on my late years on athletics into like national championships in Spain, which was quite fun. I got to know a bit more the country where I was living. Yeah, that I would say that was my first contact with movement, and also I think that's one of the reasons why my personality switched to that like obsessive compulsivity that I told you before, because athletics is a sport that is very competitive, and you always want to like win and be the best, and it's not healthy. I would say that was one of the reasons why I left, but it also gave me, some positive aspects in
for
your
sure.
personality that, they help you bring somewhere else and eventually grow, I think.
So you think the athletics kind of caused that characteristic in your personality to come out, or do you think it was kind of going to happen anyway? It just happened to sort of be athletics that showed it to you first, would you say?
Yeah, I think it may be something that was inherent within me, but definitely athletics enhanced it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting because I didn't do athletics when I was younger, but I did competitive swimming, and it was very much the same, like super intense, like training hours and hours every day. But my personality was the opposite. So I've never been like obsessive or compulsive in that way. And I think that's what made me walk away from it. The fact that you almost needed to be like that to succeed in it.
Yeah.
So I kind of walked away for a different reason, but I kind of had the similar experiences to that. So in terms of, you did athletics and then you decided to move away from that, how did you go from that to kind of where you are now and being sort of a yoga teacher in London, and what was the journey from that time?
So, I mean, my mom was always very connected to spirituality in those terms, and she always encouraged me to do meditation with her. She used to give me books to read. Also, like The Secret and like Saint Germain. I don't remember exactly the name, but I think it's called the Golden Book. It's basically all about spirituality, on how to enhance human experience, the power of your mind, the power of your thoughts. And to be honest, by that time I was reading it because she told me to, but I wasn't very interested in that.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess like every teenager, whatever your parents tell you, you don't really care. But when I ended up athletics, because I was fed up and it was too much. Also, I was training 5 days a week for 3 hours every evening, and then we were doing a test every Saturday. So basically, I didn't have weekend. I was not seeing friends. I was basically just doing athletics. That's it.
Yeah, sure.
As a teenager. So then, as soon as I quit athletics because I decided I cannot do this any longer, I switched completely. So I stopped doing sports for like 4 or 5 years, something like that. I did a bit of parkour just because I thought it was cool, but nothing too extreme, just to kind of explore. I sometimes climbed in trees because I lived in an island, and it was just for fun. Nothing really like that I was focusing on. It was mostly, like a bit of rock climbing when you go to the beach here and there. Sure. But so yeah, I completely quit doing like an actual practice, and I switched to music, which is completely well, some people may say it's different. There's a lot of similarities that we can go into, but yeah, I completely stopped doing any physical activity, and through music is when like my life changed completely for like drugs, party, playing night, staying up all night, and then sometimes 2 days non-sleep. it was a bit crazy timing. But at the time it was fun, and I thought life was meant to be enjoyed, which it is, but maybe not on those terms. Now that I look back. So yeah, I had like a gap of 4 or 5 years where I didn't do any movement practice. The only movement I was doing was my fingers, because I was a guitar player. Actually, I came to study here in London, and that was the first contact I had with the city. And the girlfriend I had at the time, she was going to yoga classes, and she was always trying to encourage me to do yoga with her. I'm like, oh, not really. Yoga is just for girls, and also it's too like spiritual, wishy-washy. There's nothing really to be learned there. That was me for like 2 or 3 years. And then when I finished university, I went back to Ibiza. I decided I didn't want to do music anymore, because I had a few bad experiences playing plus drugs, where I felt my mind was not gonna be the same anymore afterwards, especially with psychedelics. And my girlfriend decided by the same time to break up with me, and I was a bit attached to that relationship, so it hit me quite hard. And I was on YouTube starting to check like how can I help myself, basically, and I encountered a yoga video, 10 minutes, like beginners, just like practice stretching the neck, the shoulders. And I thought, okay, let's give it a try. She always told me to try, and never really wanted to. Now I don't have anything to lose. She's not here anymore. I'm not doing music. I don't know what to do with my life. So let's give it a try. And after that video, I felt great, because it was the only time after, I don't know, like 1 week since we broke up, that I stopped thinking about her, at least for those 10 minutes.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was like, wow, there is something here that I need to try again. So I came back the next day. I did the same video. I think I did that video for like 1 week every day. And those were my 10 or 15 minutes where I was able to disconnect from the craziness that I created in my mind. It was very gentle, so nothing really intense. So then after that, I thought, okay, I think I'm liking this. I like also the consistency is giving me a purpose again, at least even if it's just for me to move a little bit. It's making me wake up every morning with something to look up for. To look up to or look up for?
Worth waking up for, I guess.
Okay, good. Maybe. Sometimes I confuse. And yeah, after that, I decided to look for like an online platform. I think I looked for Alomoves or something like that. I wanted to explore a little bit more, and I went for like an intermediate practice. I thought like, yeah, I mean, I did great with this 15 minutes practice. I will do amazing. I was an athlete. I'm gonna do great for sure. And I think we did like Warrior 2 and like Warrior 3, and I was like shaking. I couldn't hold balance. I'm like, what the fuck? This is crazy. I used to be so good, and I cannot hold like my body weight for more than 10 seconds. So I guess that triggered my mind to my athletic sort of background of like, oh, I need to do great. And I started like pushing myself a lot. I was doing like half an hour videos. Then I moved to 45-minute classes, and then up to 1 hour classes for the following 4 months. By that time, it was summertime in Ibiza, and when the summer ended, I had saved some money, and I didn't want to be there in the winter because it's dead. So I thought like, what am I doing? I don't have uni anymore. I don't have a partner. I don't have anything to lose. So let's go travel. But I didn't want to just spend all my money in nothing. So I started looking for yoga retreats in Europe, and I found the ones that I wanted to go to, which were in like incredible locations. They were quite expensive for the budget that I had. So I started looking Asia, and I found a retreat in Nepal. And I started looking, I never in my life thought I would go to Nepal, but I started looking to some pictures and I saw the Himalayas and I'm like, wow, this looks amazing. So I booked, but then the retreat got canceled like the week after. And I'm like, okay, so what I already wanted to go to Nepal. I think I bought the tickets and everything. So I started looking, and the only thing I found was a teacher training. But they were saying that you didn't require any experience. So I'm like, okay, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I don't even know the name of the postures. Let's give it a try. So I went. Yeah, so I went to Nepal. Um, and the first day we arrived to the training, my teacher, he said to us, I want you to forget everything you learned. We will start from the very beginning. I'm like, okay, this is right, because I don't have a clue what I'm doing. So yeah, that's how I started.
Well, that's amazing, man. There's so many things I wanted to talk about, but I didn't want to interrupt. You were just flowing on that topic. Yeah, I think so. Was music the main reason that you moved to London in the first place? Was it?
Yeah, I wanted to be a star.
Yeah, and what style of music were you playing?
So I like different styles. It was a mix of reggae, funk, hip hop, jazz.
A blend on acoustic.
Yeah. Say again?
On acoustic guitar, was it?
Electric guitar
Oh,
was
electric.
my instrument, yeah.
But completely solo, or were you in a band?
No, I was in a band. We were called Overflow. Overflow of everything, then not only music, but everything we could encounter. And we were playing in Ibiza in like beach bars and stuff. It was quite cool. For like 3 years we were playing a lot. But yeah, as I mentioned before, I realized that lifestyle was not for me.
Did the I think you know as good as me, like that lifestyle is very easy to have in London. And I kind of had a very similar lifestyle for basically most of my 20s. I think only in the last few years was when I kind of stopped pulling back from that way of living. And did you ever have any overlap with sort of that lifestyle and the more kind of like holistic, healthy lifestyle? Or were they very separate?
Yeah, they were quite separate because when I moved back to Spain, is where I was already like fed up of that lifestyle, and then is when I encountered yoga. And then when I came back to London 3 years ago, I was already like my mindset already changed. I mean, I'm not saying like here and there I've tried some things, but
yeah,
it's much more controlled. Like
yeah,
maybe it's like 10% of what I was doing before.
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting because it took me leaving London to kind of like remove that part of my life. Like the same way I guess you moved to Ibiza, back to Ibiza. And I always found that a challenge of kind of so much of my life I follow this like healthy, like positive track. And then like 3 times a week I do something that is kind of like completely polarized to what I'm doing in most of my life. But I could never kind of walk away from it because I think in London culture, it's like so ingrained in the society. Like all general socialization is based on like drinking, isn't it? So it's so hard to separate yourself from that, even if like, and I think that's a challenge like lots of people have who live in the city. And it's not just when you're young as well, like especially in London, like going into your 40s, your 50s, like I think it's still this like battle that people are torn between.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I think something positive for me is that I am not such a big drinker anyways. So like that part of the culture which is so ingrained to the city is not affecting me that much.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, it was more about like smoking, having mushrooms, MDMA, stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So actually, Ibiza was harder than London for me.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, doesn't seem like a good place to go to find the answers.
Yeah, exactly.
So one thing that you mentioned before that like I was like I need to come back to that was how the connection you saw between music and movement, and how you felt that they're related to each other.
Yeah. So there's a speculated. Some people say that music have actually probably emerged from movement because of the synchronization, the connection that generates between people. I've read some articles where they mention that they are actually kind of like interconnected, but for me, I've always seen it as movement is something that happens everywhere at all times, right? Maybe not human movement in itself, but we are already knowing that we are rotating around the sun, and that is rotating. The moon is rotating around the earth. Like there is always movement from the most the smallest atom in the universe to like the massiveness of the wholeness of the universe itself. So movement is there, and at the same time, music is known or is represented always as a sound wave, right? And the sound wave is from emptiness or from nothingness. Sound waves create movement, or is the movement of sound.
Sure.
So in that sense, in order to create, for instance, a piece of music, there needs to be movement of sound with silence or with pause or with space, in order for that sound move from noise to a piece of music or to a harmony. And in movement, if there is no connection or there is no awareness of movement in itself, moves from being something graceful and something that interrelates between different positions, let's call them like that, to a flow. It can, if there is no space, if there is no awareness, in the same way as when you create a piece of music, there is no actual movement. It's just like random how can I say it? Random positions that cannot interrelate with each other, if that makes sense. So I see movement and music kind of like that.
I think I've always known there was a connection, but the way you described it then really kind of visualized it for me. It was quite beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if I expressed it exactly as it goes through my mind, but I tried my best.
No, it made so much sense. And I think there obviously, everything that we do, there is like a connection between it all. And I think you're right in saying that the visualizing it as the wave with the stillness, and something has to cause that change, whether it's like a physical action, whether it's like some kind of stimulus, and then that wave itself is then moving through the air as well to our ears. And the connection between those peaks and troughs in the wave, and the way that they
And
like
the spaces in between each other is what creates either a graceful movement practice or a beautiful piece of music. Yes.
yeah, exactly. And I guess that's maybe part of the reason why yoga became so important to you as well, I imagine, because you don't find in some other movement practices, like they are quite disjointed and not quite, there's not as much flow to them, there's not as much kind of like introspection, and it is a bit more stagnant and disconnected, even though it is using your own body. Would you say that's true for you?
Yeah, that's 100%. Actually, it was something that I was about to mention. So thanks for saying it. I found when I was doing athletics, um, even though I always sort of tried to connect with my body, or I had that inherent in me, I never really knew when to stop. I never really knew how to create gracefulness within, but it was all about just like giving it all and die, literally. After a few, actually I remember after a few races where I was dead, and I ended up like on the final line, just like I arrived and I basically fainted because I didn't have any more to give, because it was not about the connection and the awareness of not only the movement but also awareness of myself. It was just about wanting to win. Whether when I started practicing yoga and I started to learn about breath and about meditation, I realized that there's actually need to be something else than just moving because moving is moving because first you can, but also because you're kind of like flowing. It's kind of like a representation of your own your own life, as like when you grow from being a kid to a young adult to like an old person and dies. It's like a cycle, right? And you need to respect those parts or those points from the lowest to the highest peak. And I think before I wasn't respecting them. I was just like going all in. Whether the practice helped me to understand that there's need to be a little bit of respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the thing about yoga specifically for me, and I guess kind of like dance as well, because especially the way you've talked about it, and I imagine the way your practice is, like it is quite connected with dance in the sense that it is movements connected together, rather than these like separate things that stand alone that maybe you would find from like athletics, like a calisthenics practice, like a gym workout or anything like that. It's like the connection and the moments in between the movements are just as important as the movements themselves. And I really kind of, it made sense to me when you said how it kind of represents like who you are in your life right now. Because I think when you stand there on the mat and you go into your practice, it is you feel very vulnerable to what's going on right now, like emotionally, physically, and it's kind of all there for the taking. And the practice that you then do very much like represents in an external way, like what's going on inside.
100%. And when you look back, for instance, before, if there was no energy in my body, I kept pushing. I didn't really care why, or I didn't really question why. Whether now I know when there is something going on psychologically or emotionally, it kind of like represents how my practice is how I'm feeling in my practice, and even how it looks. So it kind of like gives me that space for me to step back and listen, and at the same time I noticed when I cannot do something, like a move, let's say a press to handstand one day, even though I've done it like thousands of times. Before I used to just like push and try to get it, and I wouldn't finish to practice until I didn't get it, even because I knew I could do it. Whether now I'm like, okay, maybe today is not the day, I will try again tomorrow. So that's what I meant by respecting myself.
Yeah, and just stepping back and taking the foot off the gas once in a while.
Yeah.
And knowing when to do it as well. I think it made me think of moments when sometimes you feel very low energy, but you actually need the practice to kind of like take you into high energy though. Do you know what I mean by that? They're kind of the moments that are confusing, because you might be thinking, oh, today's maybe not the day for sort of an active practice, but it's actually exactly what you need. And I guess that just comes through practice and experience, knowing the difference between needing that or needing to actually just have a very like slow paced, relaxed practice.
Yeah, that it depends, as you're saying, day to day, and it comes with your own experience of how your body reacts to certain things. There are days where you feel tired, but that tiredness may come from something that is unrelated to physical fatigue. And actually you need to do something a little bit more active to come back to your senses, to say. And other times when you know there is no more energy moving through your veins, you kind of like need to start doing something a bit more restorative.
Yeah, but I think one thing that I've noticed from over my whole years of practicing yoga and movement and everything is, however like passive or active the practice you do is, you never regret doing something, right? Like you always feel better afterwards. And that feeling of, before kind of like, oh, shall I do it? Shall I do it? And then even if you just do like a few basic stretches, like you always feel better afterwards. I don't feel like you might necessarily agree with that based on the look on your face.
Yeah, no. I agree. Like I don't know if that comes necessarily to. So, for instance, I believe that there is a need of some sort of movement to happen on a daily basis for your body to feel that you are alive or to feel healthy. But I also know that there's times when no movement needs to happen, because there's moments where you actually need to step back 100% and just maybe move into something a little bit more meditative because of XYZ. Like I remember a couple of years ago, I broke my calcaneum bones on my heel. I had an accident on my bike, and it was quite crazy. I actually started doing handstands with a massive cast, and because I couldn't balance on my legs, I was.
That's the obsessive part of you coming out.
Exactly, but once I fall, and I didn't enjoy that moment, and it kind of like taught me that I actually needed to stop and do nothing, or focus in other aspects of the practice. That's something that I like from yoga, is that there is not only movement, like physical movement, but you also have the movement of, as they call it, as of prana, or the movement of your breath, the breath control, or the breath work, depending from where you studied it. And then the practice of meditation, which is something that we take for granted, and I still do. Like, I try to meditate regularly, but it comes and goes. But it's something that is so important, and when it happens, then is when I truly feel like, oh my God, I'm glad I've done it, even though it takes me a while to get into it.
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes as well we can have practices where we're not quite there, like the mind is not present in the practice, like it's elsewhere. And I think that's why, like, prana, breathwork, whatever you want to call it, and meditation is so important to integrate into that daily practice, because it does bring you back to where you want to be. Because it's, even though you might have had some physical benefits from moving your body, a lot of the time it is our mental space that needs the movement, and the kind of the stripping back of everything that's gone on in the day, or even if it's if it's in the morning, to prepare for the day and open your mind up for what the possibilities of the day.
Yeah. So whichever movement practice one does is basically a way for us to feel that we are alive, right? Um, and I guess when you repeat something over and over again, as you were mentioning, it becomes automatic, it becomes robotic. So then your mind is not engaged anymore there. And then is when we start moving or shifting our thoughts into something else. Then I see it as there are two options. If you want to continue being like fully aware, either you start moving somewhere else in terms of your physical practice. So you start, that's why we are challenging ourselves to do something more intense, or something that feels harder for us. But actually, when we try to work in something as, you could say, relaxing, or something that it looks very easy, like meditation or breath work, is when we really struggle, or at least I struggle, because then you are not using movement as an excuse for your mind to be aware, but you actually need to use stillness for your mind to be aware. And then when you are able to, at least, I'm not saying master it, but when you're able to grasp that in all these other practices like meditation or breath work, then when you go back to your movement practice and you're able to combine them or join them together, then is when everything flows, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think when both those areas of my life, like the physical and the mental, are balanced, and they come together, that's when I feel kind of most at peace with everything, not just a movement practice or a yoga practice, but everything around me kind of like fits together. But I think it's important to say as well that people, like, if you say are having a physical practice that is very disconnected, and you don't think about the breath, don't include meditation, and your thoughts are off, that's not necessarily a problem. Like, everyone's different, right? And if you're satisfied with what that's doing for you, then that's amazing. But I guess if you are feeling a sense of something being missing, it could well be that, like, breath work, meditation, and the mental connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends your personality. It has to do as well with what are you looking for with your movement practice, or with whatever physical practice that you're doing. I guess, for instance, for me, when I started, I didn't care about anything else that my not how my body was looking, to be honest. I never really cared about that, but I cared about what could I do with it. Whether now, even though there's still an interest there, I try to make sure that whatever I do it feeling that there is no gap in terms of how's my body feeling, how's my mind feeling, how I am feeling. Because before it was just like body work, nothing else. And then I was coming back after finishing practice, which it felt great. But then after that, and that I come back with the very beginning when I started practicing yoga, on those moments of the practice, there was complete absence of worry, discomfort, anger, sorrow. But then after that and before that, I still had all of that in my mind. Whether now, because I try to add all these other aspects, I am slowly managing to ease those, let's say, unpleasant moments and extend the pleasantness of the practice throughout the day.
Yeah, for sure. So for people that are struggling to connect those two elements of a practice, like what would be your sort of like main piece of advice for them?
I would say taking some time off of your regular life when possible. It doesn't have to be like going to Nepal like I did, going like thousands of miles away, but trying to take some time off and going for a walk in nature, or going to a different neighborhood that they are not used to visit. Try to, because we are very robotic and we always come back to the same patterns. So the first advice would be try to break one of those patterns, do something different. From there, I would say explore things that require not only physical challenge, but maybe mind challenge or breath challenges, or like something that is completely out of your comfort zone. Because when we are in a stage of difficulty, the best thing we can do is placing ourselves outside from that situation into a completely new situation. So then we can first experience something else. So our mind's kind of like, I call it like a rinse of your mind. And then when you come back to it, hopefully there will be a different perspective.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think a question I'd love to ask you, which is kind of a big part of So We Flow, is less specific about the movement practice, but kind of what it takes day to day to have sort of a healthy mind and body. So, and maintaining a sustainable practice sort of over time, rather than these like intense, like very focused practices. And I guess from your experience with athletics, you probably have a really good idea of what the difference is and how you've integrated that into your life.
Yeah, so I would say the most important thing is having a structure of the day. It doesn't have to be like exact to the minute, but at least have a time that you dedicate to work with yourself, especially in the morning, and having like set spaces and set times for whatever you want to work with. If you want to, I don't know, even if you want to just eat, to have a time where you're eating or you're eating, have a time where you're reading, have a time for when you want to do your physical activity, have a time for when you want to be with your family, because otherwise we start interconnecting everything and eventually it becomes a big mess.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think since I've had a baby, I've really understood the importance of routine and structure. And I always I had this romantic vision of that I'd have this sort of feral child that would have no rules and we'd live this like natural lifestyle. But actually it was almost like a shackle. It was a shackle to live like that. And what was actually liberating was creating structure and routine in the day, because you know where you stand throughout the day. And you also, like, it creates vision for the future of what's getting done, and knowing that knowledge that things will get done, that you want to get done, is kind of like, I mean, I don't really want to say this word because it's thrown around a lot at the moment, but like, it's empowering in a way. It fills you with like positivity and optimism.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I think, or I believe that structure creates freedom.
Absolutely.
We all, I think we all believe at first that freedom comes from completely being out of structure, but without structure, as you were mentioning, there's no vision and there's no routing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah,
it's chaos.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
And I can imagine having a baby chaos is literal.
Yeah, literal chaos. But the baby is almost like an extreme version of all these responsibilities we have in our day to day, and a lot of them you can kind of just not consider that much. But obviously, when you have a child of your own, like, it requires absolute consideration and how everything fits around that. So for me, it was the true thing that saw structure as freedom. Like you say, I think that's the big takeaway from this podcast. I think structure is freedom, is a great thing to say to people. So Joaquin, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been amazing to chat to you, and kind of just went into some great areas, and we could have talked for another hour, I think, but want to keep it good listening for the people, and maybe we can just do it again some other time.
For sure, yeah, it was a pleasure. I have to apologize if I went all over the place.
Oh, it was perfect. It was perfect. And is there anything you'd like to share with the So We Flow listeners, whether it's where they can find you, website, Instagram, anything you want to share?
Sure. So they can find me on Instagram at Joa Yoga, or JOA Yoga all together. They always have the chance to practice with me at the Primal Yogis, actually primalyogis.com. That's my platform. And then if they want to come for a training, I think you know Miles. So me and Miles, we do trainings together.
Yeah.
They can always either hit me up or hit Miles up, and feel free to join one of our trainings.
Perfect. Thank you so much, man. Well, everyone have a great day, and we'll see you soon.